starts now.
Was Barack Obama back in 2009 saying don't have sour grapes? If you don't like the way things are going, sign with the dotted line and make a change. And a lot of people did. When he made those remarks, if you remember, the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. They also controlled the Senate. Then he pushed through the Affordable Care Act, crippled 20% of the American economy, and they lost both. And then they lost the White House. Then they lost the majority of governorships across the country, state legislature seats across the country. I played that bite because I was doing a lot of soul searching this morning. I've become friends with Kevin Leary, who is running for the 8th District. It's the Parkville area. And he was holding a fundraiser this morning. It was a hybrid of sort of a information session / fundraiser focusing on safety in schools, which is it's a priority of Kevin Leary. And education, if you've followed me over the last decade, has been a focal point of my program. And he invited me out to Silver Spring in Parkville, and I attended it. The event started out with a high school student. I'm drawing a blank on what school that she attended, but just talking about safety in our schools, and the focus was, I was going to say the focus was on county schools. It really wasn't. She attended a county school. Touched on gun violence briefly, but the conversation, as I'm listening to a variety of speakers that Kevin Leary had at his event, it really navigated pretty quickly away from gun violence. What I took away from the event this morning was there is a real problem when it comes to violence in public schools. Follow the shiny thing may be guns, but that's not really what the problem is. It's assaults, it's stabbings, it's carjackings, as we heard a couple weeks ago. And the problem is there's basically nothing that administrators or teachers or politicians can do about it. This is going back to 2014, reading from U.S. News, when President Obama had, via the Department of Education with Ari Duncan, who was also one of the proponents and architects of Common Core, along with Eric Holder of the Department of Justice, had bribed / blackmailed states to adapt policies when it comes to discipline. Reading from U.S. News, it's according to the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, among the 2.6 million students suspended each year, black boys are 3 times more likely than white boys to be suspended. Black girls are 6 times more likely than white girls to be suspended. And students with disabilities are more than twice as likely as their peers to be suspended. So what we heard was this is a civil rights issue. And as Obama made it clear time and time again, everything in this country has to do with race. States can't even that playing field on their own. So the Department of Education, along with the Department of Justice, we're going to level that playing field for the country. They were going to do that by 2 ways. If the states would not submit, they would withhold grant money. They would use money to bribe the states to adopt these policies. Or if by some miracle we found a state that was actually solvent, then they would threaten lawsuit with the schools, which obviously you don't want. So the states across the country, including here in Maryland, submitted to these ridiculous regulations when it comes to disciplining students, which basically you can't do right now. And I'm sitting in there and I'm looking at Kevin Leary. I'm thinking about Justin Kinsey, who will be on the air shortly, along with Ed Hale Jr., who will be on the air shortly, myself. And I'm thinking, why do all of us run? What's the point of it? And as they're trying to figure out how you solve this very real problem, which is violence in our schools, a lot of ideas are being thrown around. One of them is money, which I kind of scratched my head on, because part of the reason why we're in this situation is money, because we are indebted to the federal government. So money actually is one of the problems, not necessarily the solution. And not to be fatalistic about it, but I thought there's really not a damn thing we can do. Let's say that we flip the school board. Let's say that We put in a better governor. No shot against Governor Hogan, but, we clear out Annapolis, everybody. Doesn't matter. There is no 10th Amendment anymore. There is no more consent of the governed. We really aren't even living in a republic, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't at the federal level or even the state level. It wasn't legislation that passes any of this stuff. Now, there may have been legislation at the state level that would coincide with the mandates from an unelected agency, whether that is the DOJ or the Department of Education. But whether it was Ari Duncan or Betsy DeVos right now, who elected them? You don't elect secretaries, they're appointed. And this seems to be pretty significant. I mean, I'm assuming there were millions of people marching in Washington, D.C. because of the violence in schools. And it really hit home how we have navigated away from some pretty cool core principles of what this country was built on, which is living in a republic and consent of the governed. And it also proves how dangerous bureaucracy can be, an over-bloated federal government, when there is no checks and balances. Now, I'm not being fatalistic, and for most of the people in this room, myself included, Kevin Leary included, and everybody that's serving right now, I think most of the reasons why we want to run, we want to serve, is we see a problem within our community, and most of us start at a smaller level of government to fix whatever, the issues that are important to us may be. And if you look on the website of anybody running for state office, local office, one of the things I guarantee you they're going to touch on is education. And it doesn't matter. And they're saying, we really hope that we can get Betsy DeVos to roll back some of these regulations that were instituted back in 2014. And if she does that, which, by the way, should have been done on day one. I was never a fan of Betsy DeVos. Of all the picks that Donald Trump has had, I thought she was always the slowest gazelle. Should have been something that she should have done on day one. But even if she did, so what happens 3 years from now, 7 years from now, when the next loser comes in and makes more unreasonable mandates that then the state needs to submit to? What does it matter? What is the point of even having local government? As I'm sitting at Silver Spring and I'm listening to all these speakers at Kevin Leary's event, I started thinking, well, what about gun control? What about immigration? What about the issues that you would probably file under that's a federal issue? Immigration is one of the greatest examples. That's a way that a lot of local politicians are easy to kind of pivot off of that difficult topic for many. No, it's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. Well, can we all agree that education is a local issue?
Should be.
Correct, Ed Hale Jr. So why don't we, as a state, tell the feds to go take a hike?
Money.
Okay, well, that's part of it. That's part of it. And obviously we're indebted to the feds, and the solution is always more and more and more money. And as we all know, we have for lack of a better term, a balanced budget amendment here in the state of Maryland. So come sine die, the end of the 90-day legislative session, the books need to be balanced, and we can do that by cutting spending or raising taxes. We don't have the ability to print money like the feds do, which is why we evidently sacrifice the safety and the education of our children for the money. But beyond that, even if the books were balanced and we were living within our means and we didn't need the federal grant money, let's assume for a second that we were able to figure that out, which is a fool's argument, but let's assume for a second that we could. You still have the constant threat of the federal government suing the states under civil right infringements. And what has happened as a result of these actions from Barack Obama going back over the last 4 years now is violence has skyrocketed across the country. And it's not race specific. It's not limited to urban areas. The counties are not immune from it. Collectively, we have all been hurt very much by these regulations, and we have no recourse. In the past, the recourse would be what we're all going to participate in the next 8 weeks, which would be an election. And that's why this is so important. The recourse would be, I don't like what this guy is doing, throw the bums out, and we're going to put the new bum in. No disrespect, gentlemen. Okay? In the past, that was the checks and balances. But the problem is, with the exception of you, Ed, I was really thinking about you today, the county council, or city council, may actually be the most powerful people in the process. Because you're controlling the zoning, and you're the area that you have control over may be smaller, it's not the whole state, but it's a bigger bat.